Hi again, YouTube. This is extremewirehead, and this is another Vanguard clan intro series, I should say, where I delve into a clan, and we are not going to look at the meta. We're not going to look at what makes the clan powerful, what makes it unique. We're going to be looking at what you can expect from the clan, if you were a beginner at the game, and how that mindset will color the way that you think about the clan. I don't mean this to be a series meant just for beginners, but also to help refresh many players about how each clan operates and how they can help and go against you when you're facing them. Let's get started. This time we're looking at, as the title probably suggests, Megacolony. Megacolony is a very interesting clan, mostly because it's where I basically started. I really didn't want to spend too much money on this game at the start, and I wanted to experience what it was like to play the card game first and get a feel for exactly what kind of card game I was getting myself into. In that sense, we ended up with Megacolony. Megacolony, back in the day, was considered by many to be a very budget deck for a number of different reasons. To give you a bit of background, Megacolony is a mafia group that is entirely made up of anthropomorphic bugs. They operate in a way that you would expect out of a mafia, except that they're all bugs. On top of this, for some reason, they have lots of robots, and they intertwine themselves with being a robotic race of mafia bugs. Only in Cardfight Vanguard can you expect weird crap like this. And in terms of mechanics, they are not exactly top tier, although that in recent memory has been changing for the better, I would say. Before we get into the cards, I should say that the clan itself is very interesting because it delves into a topic that involves the opponent in a very interesting way. There are clans that just remove cards from the opponent, which have their own uses, their own specialties, but this one places a different kind of situation on the opponent, and as such is very interesting because it gives you many more choices to deal with them. Whether that's a good thing, whether that's a bad thing, whether that's against or pro to a player is up to you, but I'm here to talk about the cards. So let's go down to the strides. I'm going to only be looking at a couple of cards from this clan, mostly because it's a rather small clan, so there isn't too much interesting going on. First card, Poison Spear Mutant Deity Paraspear. Paraspear is an interesting card because he does something on place of Vanguard, which is very indicative of this clan. Because of the way that they're costed, they sometimes get either well-costed cards or over-costed cards. Very cheap cost or very expensive. They tend to not go in between. When this unit is placed on Vanguard, rest all of your opponent's units. If the number of rested units on your opponent side is 3 or more, draw a card, and this unit gets 5k until end of turn. Not only do you get a power boost, you get an extra draw on top of striding, which means that you're buffing up your hand size at the very start of the game. It rests all your opponent's units, which is very important because a lot of Megacolony effects rely on rested units. So it kind of just compounds upon itself. This is a very strong card for many different reasons, and mostly because of that extra draw. It really does set up a lot of great plays later on because you don't have to rely on draw triggers, and the fact that it can do so without having to be an on-hit, without requiring too much other things besides the opponent investing a little bit on the field. It's a very decent choice and something that in almost every single Megacolony deck I would approve of, even if you don't know what you're doing. Decent choice, even if you put 4 of them and you didn't know exactly what you were supposed to be doing, I would still say, oh, I can see a use for this. It's not too bad. It's a decent card because of all of those reasons. Next card we're looking at is Force Spear Mutant Deity Stun Beetle. Stun Beetle is a fun little card just because of how strange his skill is. This is technically the ace stride of Megacolony, but I really do think that this card plays more into the secondary mid phase of the game. GB2, Counterblast 2, when it hits, Counterblast 2 and face up a cop. If it hits, of course. If you do, all your opponent's vanguards cannot stand during your opponent's next phase, and your opponent cannot normal ride during your opponent's next ride phase. This essentially turns off or disengages the Vanguard. Very important because drive checks are a thing, and losing out on the drive check is a very, very detrimental thing. Being unable to re-ride a Vanguard normally is also usually the way this clan is played around. But being unable to do so makes Stun Beetle something that I think will stand the test of time just because of how disruptive the skill is. Megacolony's ace Stun Beetle, because of the ability to face up only if the skill hits, means that you can play a couple of mind games. You can make it so that you attack, they let it hit because they can't guard, and apparently you didn't have the right pieces to cost. Remember, the rest of your G zone is actually face down, so it is not visible to your opponent. You can double fake your opponent to invest more guard than they probably could have at that exact moment. Interesting card, lots of fakery and plays that can be made, and makes a lot of incredibly awesome ways to win, I think. Those are the only G4 I'm going to talk about. There aren't actually a lot. A lot of them are based on the subclans and play off the subclans much better than the current cards, but it is something to note. There are some very strong subclans in this clan, and you should take a look at them if you're interested at all. Going down to the G3, of course, we're going to start with the Strider, because the Strider is, I think, the best summary of this clan. His GB1 skill, not his GB1 skill, his Stride skill is Counter Blast 1. When you stride, choose 2 of your opponent's rear guards, rest them, and until the end of your opponent's next turn, they cannot stand, and if they are still there at the end of your opponent's next turn, and they are still rested, of course, you may draw a card. Now, this is interesting for a number of reasons. It means that proactively you are giving your opponent a ticking time bomb. If they do not deal with it, you will draw an extra card. You are essentially drawing 2 cards for a Counter Blast 1 unless your opponent plays around it. If he plays around it, he or she is not doing what they are intending to do with their clan, and that alone is very powerful. The disruption of this card is great. Even greater is the GB2. GB2 Soul Blast 2. When your opponent's unit is placed on R, you may pay the cost if you do rest that unit. It stops a lot of power plays, a lot of fancy, schmancy, multiple attacks, and in general just really annoys your opponent because it rests them. It is, of course, easily countered by a lot of other decks and a lot of other strategies, and to be honest, Soul Blast 2 is quite expensive considering the clan doesn't have much of a way to Soul Charge, and it is powerful, but it is incredibly situational, which is why it's perfect at the Soul Blast 2 mark, because it means you have to pick this out very carefully. It is the key indicator of a good Megacolony player that he knows exactly which units to rest. And that is something that you're going to learn by watching all of these videos and figuring out what is important in the clan, what should be rested, when you're not supposed to do any of this stuff, and how to play around how the other clans operate. Great card, even greater if you're an expert at the game. Machining Stag. Machining Stag is the next G3 I'm looking at, and Machining Stag is in many ways still a decent choice. Even though he's a 10k, even though he's super, super old, when this unit is placed on Vanguard, choose 2 Machinings in your soul, call them to R at rest, gain power equal to the 2 cards that were removed, making him a rather large body at a grade 3, and essentially plussing for almost nothing because they are rested. It means that you have to wait a turn, but it is still very interesting nonetheless. This card was great at its time. It's still decent now. The amount of trickery, power plays, soul, fancy, schmancy stuff, it's just incredible. Lots of the machining also have on-play abilities that are really good, like power, stuns, and stuff. Very strong card, and it really does show that even though this clan in many ways has not a very good mechanic, stunning opponents that doesn't really do anything, but because Bushiroad knows that they've got a really crappy mechanic, they've been giving them really great support to try to alleviate that problem. And it's a very interesting deck building problem to try and solve this issue, because it's either they are costed too high or costed too low, and whether or not you can make the maze of this deck work is going to be a key defining factor to a good Megacolony player. The last G3, no, not the last, we're looking at second to the last G3, Cyclorama Tooth. Cyclorama Tooth does a very similar thing to Stun Beetle, except he did it much earlier. When you break ride, plus 10k, your opponent's Vanguard cannot stand, along with all of his other rear guards. In that sense, he does mean a lot of things. He's very interesting in that regard. Doesn't use any of the CB. He forces out a lot more guard than you might expect, and disrupts in a very large scale because it's the entire field. He is, I think, much easier to use compared to Stun Beetle. That's questionable, but it is very important to note that he does exist, and he can play off even in this era just because of how disruptive the skill is. To note, you can still re-ride to be able to attack, but all of your rear guards are still stuck on the rested state. And of course, being a minor clan, they do have some jewels in the rough, I would say. This card is somewhat of a special mention, but I still think he's a wonderful card to get you into the game and get you thinking about how the clan should operate. Undefeated Mutant, a Vector Zeus. A Vector Zeus was a promo that some people just up and didn't care about because it wasn't such a big deal. One of the things that I forgot to mention, because Megacolony is a clan of expensive costs, you just stun, you don't actually kill, you don't remove, you just make them wait a turn. It's expensively costed in many cases. One of the other sides is the Giraffe chain, which does this thing where, oh, well, on top of just being a regular Megacolony, I also kill things, which is appropriate for a Mafia-type clan, I guess. And a Vector Zeus is probably the shining example of this. When this unit is placed on Vanguard, retire all grade 1 or less rear guards on all fighter sides. Great effect. Hard to predict. Incredibly interesting. This card has everything I love about the game in a single card. It just does something so out of there, so incredibly interesting and incredibly fair. You can't plan for this too well, and when it happens, it just happens. The limit break, that's forgettable. You can't stand, one rear guard can't stand, gets 10k for CB2. You're probably never going to use it because you're striding anyway, but that on Vanguard play is very powerful, and I think is worthy of this spot just because it shows you this clan doesn't just stun, might kill them too. Directly, indirectly, that's up to you to decide. Down to the G2, we're looking at the first one, I think, is Tail Joe. Tail Joe was a very old card at BTO 4, and this card is notable for a number of different reasons. It is one of the first 11k G2s that is super easy to get working. All it has to do is all of your opponent's Vanguard and rear guards are rested, and that is almost natural, I would say. Very few times will you see this not being the case, and because very few times of this not being the case, because it can work on Vanguard, because it works on rear guard, because it does everything of that, it's a very versatile card. I wouldn't say it's a card that you should run out and grab or anything like that, but I think it's notable that you have to remember, just because you have a standing unit on your side doesn't mean that they don't have ways of stopping you. And this is a very important card to teach you that they're going to push you down, just like that big tail. The last G2 I want to speak, there's going to be an honorable mention, but the last G2 is Toxic Trooper. Toxic Trooper is not a great card. I'll say it out blunt. But it does show you that on top of all the weird crap that Megacolony does, it's like a band of misfits. Sometimes you get these strange cards, and I really love the clan because it does try to experiment upon itself. When this unit attacks, all of your opponent's units cannot intercept until end of that battle. It is an interesting way of doing things, and probably not enough to put in current decks, but it's still interesting to note because it also has a G1 version, which probably sees even less play. But I love the card because it does something that is hard to plan for. Sometimes that 5k is the difference between a win and a loss, and just because you can stop all of that version, it really does help, I think. Honorable mention goes to Machining Mosquito Mark II. You can research that card on your own, but that card right now is such a beast just because it requires machining. Won't get into subclans too much, even though I've spoken about one already. I think you can find out on your own. It's not that big a deal, but it is a shining example of how you have these gigantically powerful cards in a rather under-supported clan. The G1 card that I want to look at is Gloomfly Man. Gloomfly Man is, I would say, not that important right now, but he does show you that on top of just being a general annoying Megacolony, Darkface isn't the only guy who came up with this idea first. When this unit is placed on the guard circle, if you have a Megacolony Vanguard, choose an opponent's grade 0 rear guard and rest it. It is a card that, in all honesty, you will probably never use, but it is easy to see that since the very early days of the game, since BTO4, since much earlier, you already knew that you were getting into a clan that really does disrupt. Whether it's on your turn, whether it's on your opponent's turn, whether it's through stunning, whether it's through killing, this clan is all about disruption. Whether or not they can close a game is an entirely different discussion. You can figure that out on your own, but they are kings at being annoying, and I love them for that. It's beautiful. The only G0 I'm looking at is Mega Battler C. Mega Battler C was probably for a long time the only starter anyone ever cared about, and it is a sad example of how cards in this clan can be very expensive. Counterblast 1, put it into Soul. When an attack hits that this unit boosted, you may pay the cost, choose one of your opponent's rear guards, cannot stand. That's it. You stunned one for the cost of a card and a counterblast. Very expensive, I would say. But it does show you that sometimes even these expensive costs can be a big deal. Stop a specific unit that's very important to their clan. Watch my other videos to find out, of course. Chill. But the card itself in a vacuum is terrible. Knowing how to properly use it, how to properly pick your battles, pick what is important, will make all the difference. And that's a nutshell with Megacolony. It is a clan of expensive costs, of difficult to utilize abilities, of complicated requirements, strange ways of playing. The Mafia is a hard life, but a well-versed player, one who has seen it all, can make a very large impact, and one that really cuts the throat and annoys everyone. I think for that and many other reasons, Megacolony is not a clan for beginners. It is more for the intermediate to advanced players, people who know exactly what they're getting themselves into and understand how to get through the defenses of the opponent. It is a clan that I think, on the whole, is rather cheap. I haven't even talked about the newer cards, and these cards alone would definitely make a decent deck. Include Dark Device and all these fancy new effects that are coming out and probably in the future, and you've got yourself a clan that is worthy of praise, if not some respect. This has been extremewirehead, and I'll see you on the next video. I hope to finish the Zoo Nation and move on to the next. Peace.